Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I am Coach Kim, and today's podcast is all about long distance running and your knees. You may have heard that running is bad for your knees. A lot of people have heard that, and it can be painful, especially for people. Running can be painful on the knees, especially for people that sit most of the day. But I love it when data supports the ability to run, because it is it proves it demonstrates at least some level of proof against this rumor that running is really bad for your knees. Now, we're not talking about running, that sort of equates to 100 miles a week worth of running, training incessantly, just living your life to run and just running basically all the time. We're talking about people that want to run a couple days a week and then may want to do something crazy like run a marathon, which is what is one of the things that I do for a living, which is to train people to run the New York City Marathon. So we're going to talk today. This podcast is about the data, about the study that was just released regarding some first-time runners, some data around first-time runners, and the impact that the experience of going through a training program that lasted 4 months, how it affected their knees, scientifically speaking, right? So where there were MRIs measured at the beginning and then at the end after the marathon was over. And then I'm going to talk to you about the dynamic way to improve your chances of being able to run right, to run healthy, to run smoothly without doing damage to your body. And that doesn't just mean your knees, but it certainly is part of the sort of components of a dynamic warm-up that will, and dynamic conditioning that will help you move forward with your potential running of a marathon, or maybe a half marathon, or even something shorter, or maybe it's some other activity. But some movements do need to be conducted in order for your body to be prepared to move in that forward, repetitive motion, forward direction. So let's go back to the data, because the science is really, it's not super easy to understand. And I got to reading some of the materials. There were 2 different articles about the same study. The one that I read this morning was a little less scientific, but then I got to the New York Times and I had to stop and go back and then go to a dictionary, and a medical dictionary, and define a couple of terms. And then, amazingly enough, I realized that one of the terms that they're using now is something they've just invented, that it was a different term was used before. So it's a little bit tricky, but the gist of this study, which was done in London, was a surgeon, or orthopedic surgeon, and someone who was a marathoner, and he was interested in, for himself, how running affected his knees. So these researchers found through the London Marathon Registry, they were able to get 80 volunteers to participate in this study. And it was 6 months. I said this before. I thought, for whatever reason, I was thinking it was 4 months. I started to say 6, then I thought it was 4, but it is actually 6 months of the training program. So every participant used the same marathon training regimen. They were all running the same marathon, London. They're all first-time marathoners. So they were not runners, long distance runners before. And then they went back. They went in and did an MRI of their knees at various different vantage points, and then they all went back 2 weeks later and performed the same scans afterwards. Okay, so the thing that they did I thought was kind of interesting was how they talked to the runners about the way that they felt about their physique as they went in for the first MRIs. What was kind of interesting was that a lot of them didn't think that they had any wear and tear on their knees. They didn't experience pain in their knees before they went in for before they began the marathon training program. And this is something that, on a non-scientific but on a coaching level, I'm very involved in because it's obviously a really important self-reported factor for everyone to think about when they begin to exercise. So if you're a sedentary person and maybe you hit the gym every once in a while, go to a yoga class, go, do a spin class or whatever, every once in a while, right? You're not overweight necessarily, but you're not necessarily really fit. You're just living your life, getting the workouts in when you can fit them into your schedule and doing the best you can. I mean, I would say that probably about 85 to 90% of working adults just sort of live in that large space where you're just trying to work it out. Work out to work it out. Work it out to work it out. In any case, so these guys come in and they're going in to take this first MRI, and most of them don't consider themselves coming with a preconditioned issue with their knees. However, the MRIs, and this is where I got kind of confused and had to go and do some research, the MRIs, about half of the pre-training knees. So these people, by the way, were all roughly the same age. They were men and women, so both genders, but they were all in their mid-40s, okay? All in their mid-40s. And about half of the pre-trained knees, even though most of them didn't say they had any knee issues, but half of them had frayed or torn cartilage. All right, that's pretty normal. So the soft tissues, the cartilage, the joints themselves are made up of bone, but then there's cartilage in there, and of course there are ligaments and tendons, and all of that soft tissue, as it ages, as you age, has some breaking down, experiences breakdown over time. And so frayed and torn cartilage is something that's fairly normal. The other thing were lesions in the joint's bone marrow. So where the knee, the upper leg and the lower leg meet together at the knee joint, the patella, which is that floating tiny sort of disc-like bone that sits inside of your knee, but the bottom of the femur and the top of the tibia also reach in together, and then they form that knee joint with all that soft tissue around it. So there's a lot going on in your knee. And lesions inside of the bone are something that is a new term. It used to be called a joint edema, and essentially it's like an internal site of inflammation or a sort of bruising, I guess would be the best way to describe it. I looked at a bunch of pictures and I just looked for the descriptions. It's essentially just an aggravated site of additional tissue that is where likely you would experience some pain. But even though these folks weren't necessarily experiencing the pain, they had the start of this. And this is what a lot of doctors believe may be the beginnings, the early signs of osteoarthritis. Anyway, so I found that really, really interesting. So essentially what it means to us lay people, because I'm not the science person completely. I'm certainly not a doctor, and I need to check into these things for my own body, and obviously also for my training clients. The thing that it means to the regular person is that when you get to your 40s, you have experienced some wear and tear of your physique that makes a difference when it comes to all of your movements. Now, here's the other thing that's kind of fascinating, and this is a different study, but it doesn't take much to understand the significance of it. In younger people, there's more inflammation accumulated after a long stretch of sitting down on your butt and not moving than there is when you are moving, when you are running. Okay? So the fact that by the time you get to your 40s, you have some of this wear and tear, both on the soft tissue and in the hard tissue inside of the bone marrow, where you've got this kind of bruising effect, these minor sort of early stage osteoarthritis condition that they call now a bone marrow lesion. It's important to take that into consideration in terms of the way that you train your body to run the marathon. So back to the study for just a second. What they did, as I said before, afterwards is to take these 80 people in London through the same exact training program. Now, I don't have the specifics of the training program itself. And these were not fast runners. These were people that were going out to run a race like the runners that I typically run with, who are bucket list runners. They run for a charity, so they're raising money and they want to just complete the race. They want to get the medal, and they're typically 5 to 6 hour marathon runners in terms of their time. And that's what essentially was happening here. The largest majority of them ran, I think it was a 5.5 hour marathon, and then they went back into the lab, and they all had the same MRI scans produced on the other end 2 weeks later after the marathon, after they were able to, rest and reduce inflammation, which is normal for the experience of participating in a marathon. The thing that was fascinating, so the things that appeared before the marathon, those cartilage strains and the bone marrow lesions, the wear and tear, they shrank after the marathon. This is not science that I would say is worthy of, complete change in our philosophy about long distance running, in terms of everybody just going out in their 40s and trying to run a marathon. There are certainly still people that definitely should not run marathons. However, it is really important to use these facts, to use this data to process, to synthesize some opinion about running that is not necessarily real negative in terms of its potential to do harm to your knee joints. And therein lies the purpose of going through all of this. The two articles, one is at a place called InsideHook.com. It was published just yesterday morning, in fact, by a reporter named Tanner Garrity on InsideHook.com. The other article, which is in the New York Times, right? So this was a couple of days ago, by Gretchen Reynolds, who is someone that writes about health and fitness in the New York Times all the time. And so her article is a little more detailed and has links to other studies in the online article. So if it's interesting to you, if you are thinking about how to analyze, to potentially sort of evaluate whether or not you could possibly participate in a longer run, a run that would take an hour or more. Of course, an hour or hour 15 is roughly the, kind of novice training level for a 10K. And then about 2.5 hours to 3 hours, it would be the typical experience for a novice half marathon runner. And then you're looking at 5.5 to 6, maybe 6.5 hours for a novice marathon runner. So, and by that, I'm talking about 11 to 12 minute mile type of running. And that's all, a practical level of activity for people. But I want to switch gears to what you do to help your body be prepared for this activity in the event that this data helps you buy in a little bit to the idea that running is a great exercise. Running is a great way to slim down. Running is a great way to elevate your heart rate, to work that heart muscle, and maintain a level of aerobic conditioning that will keep you alive longer, that will help your internal organs function better, that will help you feel more energetic and experience more overall activity in your life. You don't want to run your body into the ground to beat yourself up and run to a place where you're exhausted. I mean, I'd you run to exhaustion. If you are interested in running a marathon and you are truly interested in that, please get in touch with me at bodybyInShape.com. I'm happy to send you one of the many different training programs that we've developed over the years for different lengths of time based on different number of days per week where you can run and various other things, lots of warm-up exercises, etc. But the bottom line is that the aerobic conditioning in terms of running and the impact that it has on your posture, the load of your spine, your breathing, the ability for your body to coordinate its ambulatory movement as a function of staying mobile for a longer period of time in your life is something to behold as well. Just last week, in fact, my podcast was about the turning 100-year-old ski aficionado, Mr. Obermeyer, Klaus, I think, Obermeyer. And I talk all the time about my 92-year-old client who I see in New York City. Now, he's not running. He is only really barely walking, but that's because of an orthopedic condition, a congenital issue that he has with his left ankle, and has nothing to do with the fact that he is still ambulatory, still moving around, still going to the office at 91 years old, and and doing the most that he can to stay alive, to stay alive and functioning as long as possible. But to do that, you've got to be able to take the time. You've got to prioritize the dynamic movement patterns that you do to prepare for running, even to prepare for walking before you head out. And I mean literally before you walk out the door. So these are exercises that are not hard. They don't require any equipment. The only thing that is helpful in terms of lateral movements, because I'm going to talk a little bit about hip, glute, and ab stability, and I'm going to talk about lateral movements that side-to-side movements that really need to be incorporated into a warm-up in order for you to move forward. So side-to-side movements, lateral movements are really, really critical, because over time, what happens as your body is moving forward is that you begin to get tired. And when you begin to get tired, your body, the smaller muscles that support the forward movement, not the main muscles that do the forward movement, but the support muscles that help the forward muscle, help the big muscles moving. Those are the little muscles that start to get tired the most. And those are the muscles that reside and act on the lateral parts of the body, the side parts of the body. So by exercising, by warming, dynamically motivating and conditioning those side muscles, you're going to better prepare your body to move forward. I know that seems a little counterintuitive, but it will make sense once you get to do it. So let's just talk about the main things that are important. And then the last thing is one other component is the issue of right versus left strength and conditioning and stability. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. I call that concept pivoting. My company, we develop 8 sort of functional base movement priorities for all of our workouts. It's like the periodic table, in a way, of functional movement. And these 8 baseline priorities are then, we have all of in our exercise database, all of our exercises are categorized by primary functional priority and then secondary functional priority. And some, of course, movements like, what's a good example of one? A burpee with a push-up in the middle, include multiple movement patterns just within the one exercise itself. Those compound exercises are more difficult, but obviously more effective, more efficient in terms of your time. However, every exercise has a base sort of functional priority. Pivoting is this left-right balance component that really comes into play when you get out there and you're trying to run a little more than chasing the street bus one block. Like if you want to run even as little as a 5K, a couple of miles, 3 miles, you want to prepare your body for the activity. I do want to make one note before I start talking about the individual exercise priorities, and say that it is winter. I'm recording this podcast the week before the Christmas holiday and Christmas and Hanukkah holidays, which amazingly enough are right in the same week this year. I urge you to take your runs outside. Now, I know if it's raining, if it's really windy, and you feel like crap, you don't want to run outside. It's so much easier to just go run on the treadmill. But there are two reasons. There are many reasons why you don't want to do that. There are two really serious reasons. Number one, I'll get off my sustainability complex in just 1 minute. One is that plugging in a treadmill into a wall, turning it on, and running while you watch the news or listen to music is carbon footprint gone way the fuck awry. Excuse my language. I'm sorry if I don't normally curse during these, but I'm really just sick of talking about some of these really stupid decisions that people make. I know that people want to run on treadmills because it's easier. You don't have to put on clothes, bundle up and stuff like that. I get all of it, but I want to do it myself. However, we've got to think about what we're doing to our planet. And when you turn on a treadmill and you run for half an hour, you burn 17 light bulbs worth of energy, of electricity. So don't get on the treadmill. The other reason to get outside is because even the outside air, even though it might be somewhat painful initially for you to breathe in through your nose, it is a conditioning component for your respiratory system. And if you're asthmatic, I know that this is not a blanket suggestion that can be accommodated by every single person. There are people that have reasons to wear masks over their noses and filter air and have trouble breathing, various other things. But being in the air that is fresh in nature is so much better for your conditioning, your aerobic conditioning level. So those are the two reasons to take your run activities outside. Now, the exercises. I want to get to the exercises because I only have 7 minutes and then I want to let you go. But the thing that I want to make sure, and this is not a workout, so if you want to try a few of these, that's fine. But I just want to, you can get in touch with me and on our website at bodybyInShape.com. There are plenty of exercise, of workouts on the other podcast channel, as well as downloads that you can find that are dynamic warm-ups and various other things. But you can get in touch with my team at bodybyInShape.com to get, we've got lots of free content. We're happy to send it out to you if you are interested. So what the first thing that I said had to do with the stability of your glutes, your hips, and your lower abs, right? Now, the first thing that you should always do, not necessarily in this order, but one of the main things that you should always do as you get started to dynamically prepare for a run or a hike or a walk or a bike or whatever is to get on your floor and get into hip bridge. Hip bridge. It is so common sense and so no nonsense that I could just hang out in hip bridge all the time. In fact, I sometimes do. I lie in the living room floor, and that's how I, check out the news if I have the opportunity to be disgusted by what's happening in our country. I will lie on the floor and lift my hips into the air with my knees bent, my feet flat on the floor. And just this morning, here's my tip. Just this morning, there was a client, actually a woman that is not my client, who was with my client in the gym in one of the buildings there where I see people on Madison Avenue, and this woman had her headphones on, so I couldn't even give her the tip. But her toes were in the air in hip bridge, which is a big time no. If you get into hip bridge, or when you get into hip bridge, because I know you're going to do it now, such an important position. You lie on your back. You bend your knees. You put your feet flat on the floor. And when your feet are flat on the floor, your knees and your ankles should make a straight line up and down, vertical line, invisible line. Your toes should not turn out. You don't make an angle out with your toes. You keep your feet parallel to one another. And then you keep your toes flat on the floor. You don't want to lift up your toes, because if you lift up your toes and you're only pushing into the floor with the heels of your feet, you're going to put strain on your lower back. And then the primary stability, the primary working muscle is the quad, your thigh. That's not what the hip bridge is for. You should feel the hip flexors extending completely out straight. And if your feet are flat, you should feel the butt engage and your hamstrings. Now, if you don't feel that and you're in that position, lift up your heels. Makes it slightly harder. I call that a ballerina bridge. And by lifting up your heels, you're accentuating the load, the work level for the back of your leg, the hamstrings, and your glutes, your butt. Okay? That's a hip bridge. Hopefully, if you've been listening to my podcast over the years, you know what a hip bridge is. You could do it without me saying anything. And you know that I have all these really sort of like hang-ups about particular imperfections that I notice with people, and I correct them when I'm obviously with them and stuff. But the one thing that really bothers me about hip bridge is that people lift up their toes and they turn their toes out. So keep your feet flat. And then if it's too easy for you in this position, you can do lots of different variations. The database we have of exercises at my company is probably filled with 12, 13, 14 different versions of hip bridge. I love them all. A lot of them make we're going to get to some of that work when I talk a little bit about pivoting, about left-right balance and strength issues. But there's so many different variations for hip bridge. So that is that hip, butt and lower ab stability move that I want to make sure that you do. Then you turn your body over and hold a plank for a minute. 1 minute, 60 seconds, hold a plank. I'm not going to have you do it right now, but you can, of course, do it right now if you want. As I complete the podcast, I've got about 2 minutes left. So a plank, why is a plank important for running? Well, because your trunk in your forward movement, your arms move forward and back, right? So you can sit at your desk and pretend that you're running, because you can swing you don't make tight fists, but you keep a sort of closed light fist, and you move your elbows forward and back, not side to side, forward and back. Drive the elbows backwards and forwards. And if you do that while you're sitting at a chair, you can feel the rib cage want to twist a little bit. As your left elbow comes forward, you turn a little bit to the right. As your right elbow comes forward, you turn a little bit to the left. So if you're moving and your feet are turning over 180 steps per minute, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That level, that repetitive level of patternistic hit foot strike, you're going to be moving your arms forward and back pretty quick, and you're going to need strength through your trunk. The other thing, of course, is that your trunk manages your hips, right? The trunk is the leader, is the center of your kinetic energy and the leader of all of your movement, the conductor of all of your movement. So you want to do plank a lot when you are preparing for any sort of forward movement. Now I want to talk about the left-right, the pivoting issue, the left-right balance issue. And I want you to, if you're doing some of this stuff to experiment, you want to stand up, because the one thing that you want to do as part of your the idea of potentially going out for a run is to know how much stronger your right side is relative to your left side. And you can't know with a 100% certainty. So there's like a balance test you can do where you can, a quick way to do it is to close your eyes and lift up your left foot and see if you can stand on your right foot with your eyes closed for 10 seconds. And then do the same with your left foot. If you're right-handed and you're not already used to that little test, you're not going to be able to stand on your left foot very easily. You're going to feel unstable. The thing to maybe make a note of, maybe write it down or type it out into a Google Doc or something, would be for you to really hone in on how it feels to be on the right leg by itself versus the left leg by itself. Really important for you to know that, because any long effort, and this is not just for running, but it's for walking or hiking or biking or swimming or rowing or whatever, your left leg is going to tire first. So if you're out for an hour, and this is why I go with like the 1 hour effort when I was talking about before, if you're out for an hour and you begin to get tired, the muscles, the smallest, the weakest muscles of the left leg, which are the smallest muscles of the left leg, which means those lateral muscles. I'm going to talk about the lateral movement in a minute, but of course now I'm over time, so I'm going to try to finish quickly here. The left leg muscles get tired faster, which means your right leg is going to do more work. You are not going to realize this happens, but it does happen subconsciously, inadvertently, without your making the choice. Your right leg is going to help out your left leg. And I say that because most people are right-handed. Left-handed people are off the radar in a completely different dimension in terms of the way that the left-right thing works. And so if you're left-handed, I'm left-handed. If you're a left-handed runner, call me. Get in touch with me. I would be happy to help you figure out the way that you can calibrate your body in terms of this pivoting priority. Now, let me talk a little bit about the lateral movements, because lateral movements are simply side-to-side movements. And that seems pretty standard. If you want, the one thing I think I maybe started talking about lateral movements and then I never actually said what I was going to say, which is that if there's one piece of equipment that you could get that's helpful if you want to run, it's a resistance band. And it goes around your ankles or around your knees, and you use it for lateral movements. Now, if you're on your feet, by that I mean lateral walking with a band around your feet, around your ankles, or if you don't have a band, you could do lateral side kicks, lateral lunges, those types of things. And if you're on the floor, like on your hands and knees, you can do exercises like fire hydrant moves where you lift up the leg to the side, lift up and kick, that kind of stuff. Or if you're lying down on your side, there are a whole series worth of things like clamshells and clamshell kicks and those kinds of exercises that force the gluteus medius, which is the top of your butt, but it sort of wraps the side of the top of your pelvis around to the side. And then there's a tiny muscle called the tensor fasciae latae, which resides at the top of the IT band. And because it's weak, your IT band is tight. And so, at least that's one of the reasons. But it all stems from the fact that we are way too sedentary. So being up and on your feet, the more that you can, the better off you're going to be. And hopefully that means that you're going to take up running. And then you can get in touch with me and I can help you with that. So I'm going to say goodbye because I'm way over time now. But have a great rest of the week. I'll be back next week with another new episode.